We've been utterly lied to about our history and our origins through scientism. Our timeline is completely messed up. We have no idea who we are or when we are. And we barely even understand where we are, considering all the deceptions around, the heliocentric model and the rest.
Well, the real danger is the fact that we are heading toward a post-human apocalypse.
There may be a connection between modern-day abductions and the ancient tale of the Nephilim.
If we don't understand the Genesis 3:15 narrative, the Messiah will crush your head, you will bruise his heel. That is the gateway to the entire rest of the biblical prophetic narrative.
Pergamum. They're in the city where Satan's throne is. Satan is the prince of Rome. The prince of Rome is Jupiter. The prince of Rome is Zeus, because Satan is Zeus.
The end game, which is Armageddon, is going to be the emergence of a new golden age in which the gods walk openly among mankind as they did in the world before the flood of Noah. And there's no stopping it. It will happen.
Yeah, so obviously, if you guys saw the title, is 1948 the generation Jesus was talking about? Ricardo and I was saying it's very cool. He started on TikTok around the same time I did, and we've been coming to the same conclusions around the same time separately, and that's why we've been connecting a lot more lately. But so a lot of us have been focusing on Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, and when he's talking about this generation, and then he's giving you the parable of the fig tree. Like, remember the lesson of the fig tree. And he's talking about that all these things are going to be fulfilled before this generation passes away. My words will pass, the heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not. So he mentions this fig tree generation. And so what we've been taught, a lot of people who learn dispensationalism and the futuristic eschatology, we've been taught that 1948, the creation of the state of Israel, like the modern state of Israel, is the start of this generation. This is when the fig tree's putting out its leaves. You see summer's near, and there's 40 years away from all the things going to happen. So the people that generation who grows up in that time is going to see all those things. Ricardo, is that generation the generation Jesus was talking about?
I think it was. You're talking about 1948 or in the first
1948.
Oh.
I was like, plot twist. He says yes.
No, I absolutely don't, to be honest, because, we were talking this morning and they have to keep moving the goalpost because it's not happening the way that they think it's supposed to happen. So 1948, they thought, okay, that's a countdown. Now we got 40 years. And so they even had books in 1988, and there was 88 reasons why Jesus is coming back in 1988. And so people were freaking out. They were selling all their stuff, and, the end is near and Jesus is coming. And, obviously it never happened. And so these people who were saying this 40 years and, found out to be either false prophets or liars or deceivers or whatever you want to call it, they just kept saying, well, maybe a generation is 80 years. And so, and obviously it still never happened. And so now they've gone all the way to say that a generation is 120 years. And so they just keep moving the goalposts out further and further. And it's just trying to fit the 1948 into biblical prophecy. But as we've been looking into, that date may not even have anything to do with biblical prophecy. And actually a lot of people who have looked into it, it was like a Rothschild type. Am I allowed to say that here?
Yeah, I think so. I think we can say, obviously, we'll say that a lot of the things we're going to say about the creation of this is allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly these things happen, we're going to just say, we're not going to say there's anything. That's what we'll say. I will say the research that I looked into, of course, is funny because I was literally listening to, I was refreshing myself on the creation of the modern nation of Israel. And obviously, this is not a racist Zionist. Obviously, the nation of Israel, the political movement of establishing a state of Israel, is called Zionism.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean there's any race of people. It could mean a religious group, and it could just mean people who believe that establishing a nation of Israel is biblical prophecy, like the Christians who want to do this, and that's part of what God wants them to do. Now it is interesting, as you said, you were talking about a generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I think the more I've been looking into it, it's like you can see like a generation in the Bible is 40 years.
That's right.
Based on pretty much everything I see. Just think like the very first good example of this, I think, is the generation that does not get to go into the promised land. You know, they leave Egypt and they're out in the wilderness
for 40 years.
And it's like this generation is not getting in the promised land. And so he waits till they all die. And how long does it take? It takes 40 years.
Yeah.
40 years in the wilderness. So again, and then I said, it's funny that you think about like the King Saul is king for 40 years. Mm-hmm. David's king for 40 years. Solomon's king for 40 years. Yeah. I think Jesus, when he is resurrected, he stays on earth for 40 days before he's resurrected, before he ascends to heaven. 40 days and 40 nights on these fasts. It's like there's obviously 40 is a significant number. I think I could maybe even buy 70 years because like 70 is like a biblically complete number. Right. But yeah, now when you start the 120 years, are they trying to take that from like Genesis when my spirit's not going to abide in man, I'm going to give them 120 years?
Yeah, I think so. It's possible. But like I said, they just keep moving the goalpost and, all of that kind of wraps around the pre-tribulation rapture stuff and all that because, they're saying, oh, the rapture is going to happen, So, I mean, we know if what we're saying is true, you guys, you pre-trib rapture guys, you're just way, way off by like 1,000 years or more.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
At least. Well, I mean, I think that's the funny thing is like that there's the eschatology would have to dictate now that like you really do think, and that's probably why they're pushing out to 120 years because, people talk about the red heifers, but it's like, okay, so they got some cows. All right. I mean, I'm not saying that's nothing, but I'm saying that they're not building the temple. So back in the day, so this is what they said. So remember when Jesus said that they asked him for a sign, he said, you tear this house down and I'll build it again in 3 days. And they don't know he was talking about his body. He's like, basically killed this temple and then I'll raise it back in 3 days. But they said, how are you going to do that? It took 46 years to build this temple the way it was. And again, it's funny, like as we get into like the old world buildings, I said, I was just in DC, the way the temple would be created, like the way it was, I don't even know if they could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think they were saying, I was listening to something else and they were talking about I think it was from R.C. Sproul. It was an old sermon. He was talking about that some of the stones were like 65 feet long in the temple. Like the ones that from when Herod was building it back. And they were talking about how amazing the structure was. That's literally why the apostles were like, Jesus, look how great this temple is. Look at the stones. Look at the endowments. It was really awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it obviously must have been a sight to behold. So how long would it take? Some people were saying, I remember like when I was first starting to look into this stuff, people were acting like, oh, they've already got all the blocks cut. It's ready. They can put this thing up at any time. No, that's not accurate. I mean, I don't believe that they could. Again, maybe they could put a tabernacle up. I did have that thought. What if they just put a tabernacle up? And what if they said that was the temple?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you that. That could go up pretty quick. But they probably couldn't even do that right. I mean, so like the idea of like the timeline of like how long would it take for them to actually, first of all, they have to get some kind of approval. They have to make a deal with the people in that area to let them build a temple, which again, you have the Dome of the Rock there, and the place is already like a tinderbox as far as like the political tensions in that area.
Right.
So if they tried to build the temple now after this war, I mean, that would take a lot of political power to be able to do that. And I'm not saying they wouldn't do that, but I mean, how long would all that take?
Honestly, though, but think about this: if they're trying to recreate all the events that is going to possibly deceive more people into thinking that they're fulfilling a prophecy, Well, the second temple was built under, troublous times, it says. So what if they're, you know what I'm saying? Just entertaining that thought.
What if this is the way that it gets done?
Yeah, because the second temple was built in troublous times as well. And if they'll look at that verse and say, look, they're building it. It's in troublous times. They're in war. They're still building the temple. And I could just see how that can really like pull people even deeper into that third temple deception.
Right. I do think that that's. I mean, there's two ways to look at this, because again, I was listening to the Illuminati by Jim Marrs, and it was talking about the creation of this, the Zionism that was looking for a state, and it was talking about the Sabbatean Jews and like the Frankists and these people who are like, yeah, connected with like the international people, whatever. Like I said, I know this gets sensitive, but these were the people who were wanting a state of Israel. And so their goals are not necessarily the goals of they're certainly not the goals of what God wanted when he was telling the people to go back and build the second temple. To me, that was like, obviously those were straight prophecies from Daniel. It was from Isaiah. And they're saying, from Ezekiel, that God wants this temple back, and he's literally going to go back, and his presence is going to fill this temple again. Well, these people don't have those same goals, and I know that, like I said, so I know that obviously Cyrus the Great was not a, quote unquote, good Jew or anything like that. But I mean, he obviously did believe in the Most High God, because he gave him credit for like giving him his kingdom. Like that's the interesting. I always think that's one of the most awesome parts in the Bible is when Isaiah is prophesying about Cyrus, and he's literally calling him by name. And it's like 200 years later, Cyrus is reading about himself from Isaiah, and then he goes in, basically orders the temple to be rebuilt, and all, basically all the stuff. And it's pretty awesome to see that. And he recognizes our God, the true God, as the Most High God, and gives him credit for it.
Yeah, that's kind of like when Nebuchadnezzar got his mind back, and he realized that, oh yeah, this is the true God. And and after he was humbled, he realized, yeah, I'm nothing. God is able to abase those that are filled with pride.
Yeah. Yeah, those are very awesome stories, because obviously we're not talking about like men who are known to be good. Again, so as Nebuchadnezzar is always, I think, is an incredible story, because he's typically looked about as very bad, but it seems like at the very end of his life he repents and gives credit to God. And literally gets humbled. So I mean, it's like, did Nebuchadnezzar, is he getting raised up on the last day? And maybe he is. I mean, he definitely. I mean, I think that based on what we know about God, I think he is, and that seems crazy. But so to go to modern times now, from what I've seen, I'm not seeing anything like that who are giving credit to God to establishing this nation and putting it back in there. And the one thing that I really don't see scripturally is, did God ever ask for this? I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's what I really have to ask people, that I said, even when I was talking about like the second temple versus the third temple, obviously there's clear prophecies about another temple, like go do this. Where is the call to build a third temple? So, I mean, so like in the minds, I think of at least me not that long ago, I thought, well, obviously God doesn't want this temple, but it has to be built in order to fulfill this prophecy about a man going in there, doing this abominable desecration of this thing, and then saying he's God in there. So I was like, so it was almost like in my mind, I know that has to happen, and I don't really need to see a scripture that says God wants this temple back, because I know this has to happen. And I think that's where a lot of us who had the futurist view, we know that. But again, like I started to think about it when Jesus is saying, your house is going to be left unto desolate. And then he's talking about the desolation of Jerusalem. It's almost like if God says this place is going to be desolate, for one, he doesn't want another temple. I mean, I think that even like the futurists would agree that he does not want a temple there. He's saying that, like, obviously at this point, like we are the living stones of like God's temple. Like, the Holy Spirit lives in us. God doesn't live in in temples made by men anymore.
That's right.
So that's for sure. So at this point, I don't know. I mean, I guess, like I said, what do the futurists really see in this, other than we know if it would almost be an abomination just to build it,
Right.
that he would not fill it. And then again, if people started sacrificing in there, that's an abomination, because Jesus was the ultimate sacrifice for us. And then it's like, but at the same time, it's not quite as an abomination as it would be if some guy goes in there and says he's God, because that temple, a third temple, would never contain the presence of God in it. God, putting the Ark of the Covenant in there, God's not filling that Holy of Holies. No. It would just be a temple built by a man, and some man would go in there and say he's a God. That's happened many times, and that's not considered the abomination of desolation, which is interesting. I've been watching people pointing me to a channel called Bible Scribe, and a lot of people say this, and I think even like R.C. Sproul says this. When people say the Great Tribulation, they put it in all capitals. With the abomination of desolation, they put it in all capitals, and it's like, those are not capitalized events. It's just like, you have desolation, you have tribulation. There's nothing specific about that other than just this is going to happen. And yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, those are good points, but they need to do that to just put the emphasis, the Great Tribulation, the abomination of desolation, But like you were saying, I mean, God's never going to fill that third temple. They can build a third temple all they want. God's not going to dwell with them, and he's definitely not going to honor any sort of sacrificing, because everything that needed to be fulfilled concerning that already has been, in my opinion. And even the whole regathering of Israel, like what we're talking about, if you read a lot of those verses in the Old Testament, it's talking about them being gathered together back to a land after being in captivity. So this 1948 date, supposedly the first time ever that God actually brought his people back to a land without them turning to him and repenting again. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so that's a huge red flag right there too. And, people debate, is that the real place or not? But honestly, I think right there at the end in 70 AD, when the abomination of desolation happened, I mean, that was it. And like, they were kicked out of the real Israel. And I possibly think that God wouldn't even allow any heathen people to even dwell in his holy land, because that's what it's often referred to as in the Bible, and the holy hill, Mount Zion, and all that. And so if you wanted to dwell in that land, you were going to be under strict orders from God to do the things that he wants you to do, and not just, just this random getting together of some people in the Middle East that we are calling the promised land.
Right. And it's just, I think that's like it is like the modern church. And I think, as somebody who could speak, like I was part of it not that long ago, even when I was probably still waking up, was that people are so ignorant to obviously 70 AD. They're ignorant to the establishment of Israel. So they just obviously just looked at like, well, we're supposed to support Israel. And like that's just some completely vague thing. And if you think about it, obviously I'm reading through the Book of Kings. Well, Israel's not very good very often in the Book of Kings. So it's like the idea of just supporting them regardless. Like, God didn't support them all the time. Obviously, then there was Judah, and then there was Israel. And like, even think about, so like, some people don't even understand like that Israel is not Jewish people. Judah was the Jews. Like, that's like, even so, Jesus goes to Samaria, which was literally the capital of like Israel in the times of, I think Ahab is the one. He's the one who moved the capital to Samaria, I think.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if it was Ahab. It was one of the real bad kings, though. He moves the capital to Samaria. And so you have a capital in Samaria, and that's Israel. Ephraim sometimes it's called. And then you have Judah. And then obviously that's where Jerusalem was, the city of David. You have the temple there as well. And then so there's the split kingdom. So when Jesus goes and talks to the woman by the well in Samaria, she's lamenting the fact that she's not a Jew, she's a Samaritan. She's not allowed to go. She can't go worship the Lord like she wants to, because she has to go to the temple. And then he tells her like that there's going to be a day, and it's right on the doorstep. You're going to be able to worship the Father in spirit and truth. You're not going to need to go to a temple.
That's very prophetic too. You think about it, knowing the destruction is gonna happen.
Absolutely. He knows the destruction. I mean, that's what I was saying. Like, once you see it now, and I said, I wonder how many people in the chat can tell me if they've done this with what we're saying. Reread some of the Gospels, particularly like Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, or not John. Not John as much, because John is a little different, but like Matthew, Mark, and Luke, like knowing why Jesus is there, looking at what John the Baptist says when he's there. And I was saying, I was interesting. I want to bring this up real quick. Yeah, like knowing Jesus's mission, that he shows up at a very specific time, obviously based on the Daniel prophecies of what's going to happen. And it's literally like Daniel's prophesying this thing that needs to happen. I'm going to give you this many years to repent, for atonement, and all these things for God God is giving them this much time for a second chance. And so what's very interesting, I thought was awesome, is that I guess without the eyes to see this, when the apostles are asking Jesus about why does Elijah need to come, the Pharisees say Elijah needs to come before the Messiah can be here. And so understanding that they saw the Messiah as not the one who was going to die, but they saw him as the conquering king. So when they were thinking of the Messiah, they were thinking of the day of the Lord. So that's who they were picturing because they were wanting the conquering king. And so I went into, and so where that comes from, it comes from, let me go into, it's Malachi.
Yeah, it's in Malachi.
Malachi chapter 4, and it's right over here. I'm going to go right down here, and it says, actually, chapter 4 is really short, so I'm going to read the whole thing. And it says, "For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when all the arrogant evildoers will be stubble. The day is coming shall set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. But you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall shine with healing in its wings. You shall go out leaping like calves from the stall, and you shall tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day that when I act, says the Lord of hosts. Remember the law of my servant Moses, the statutes and rule that I commanded him at Horeb from all of Israel. Behold, I will send Elijah the prophet before the great awesome day of the Lord comes. And he will turn the hearts of fathers in their children, and their hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I strike the land with a decree of utter destruction." Mm-hmm. So they're asking about Elijah coming before the day of the Lord. And then, so what does Jesus say? Elijah has come. Mm-hmm. Elijah has come. So I think that when people read it in the book of is it in Matthew? He's asked that. I mean, it's probably more than one gospel.
Yeah, I'm trying to look. I have some notes on that too. I'll find it real quick.
Yeah, so they're asking about this needs to happen, and so if you don't understand the Old Testament prophecies about what they're talking about, they say before the Messiah comes. So we're like, of course, Jesus is the Messiah, and he's just saying John the Baptist is here before this happens. But what they're really saying is before the day of the Lord comes, and Jesus says he has come, and this is like so it's interesting how a lot of people would say that these things, again, this is what you kind of get into the 1948 stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, this can't happen yet because
Elijah hasn't come.
There's not a temple. There's not this. There's not an Antichrist revealed. There's not the world hasn't been preached to completely. Whatever else they're trying to say, and so they're saying before the day of the Lord comes, Elijah needs to come, and Jesus says he has come. And so then you understand like what they were actually asking about, and that's how the apostles actually would have viewed it too, because the apostles, before they understood, this is before they understood he was going to die.
Yeah,
that's why they were asking about can we sit at your right hand? Who's going to be the greatest amongst us? They're thinking about like a lot of people are talking about the millennial kingdom, as we've been taught, is they thought that they were going to be ruling from Jerusalem, sitting on actual thrones in this city,
Yeah.
like that we can all see, just like we've been taught about in the Millennial Kingdom. And it wasn't like that.
No.
It was never going to be like that.
Yeah, so I picked up those notes real quick, and just, for whoever, wasn't following, when we were talking about Elijah, Jesus was actually talking about John the Baptist. Also speaks in Malachi chapter 3, verse 1. Also, he says, "Behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. And the Lord whom ye seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant whom ye delight in." And then also in, like you said, in Luke 1:17, it says, "And he shall go before him in the spirit and power." And this is when, before John the Baptist was even born, it says, "He shall go before him in the spirit and power of Elias, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." And so he's basically quoting that Malachi verse. And then just real quick, Matthew chapter 11, I think that's where he actually just plainly says this is Elias. Matthew chapter 11 and verse 7, he says, so he was going, I'll just give a summary, like he's saying, when you went out in the wilderness, what'd you come to see? And then he's talking about John the Baptist, how he says that he was a prophet, but he's saying that he was more than a prophet. And then he said, "For this is he of whom it is written, Behold, I send my messenger before thy face, which shall prepare thy way before thee." And then he says that there's not anyone greater than John the Baptist that was ever born. So this was the greatest prophet. And he says, from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. And then he just goes on, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." And then I guess he concludes in Matthew chapter 17, verse 10, just to keep that going. Matthew 17, verse 10. And he says, "And his disciples asked him, saying, Why then say the scribes that Elias must first come?" So he's talking about before the day of the Lord. "And Jesus answered and said unto them, Elias truly shall come first and restore all things. But I say unto you that Elias is come already, and they knew him not, but have done unto him whatsoever they listed. Likewise shall also the Son of Man suffer of them." Because, John the Baptist came, they, treated him very spitefully like the Lord. He got beheaded, all that. And then the disciples understood that he spoke unto them of John the Baptist. So they realized it's very clear. This is what he's talking about.
Yeah, it's very clear with this context, because even I go back in when I said, so Malachi 4:1, and it says, "Behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when the arrogant evildoers will be stubble. The day is coming, set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts. So it will leave them neither root nor branch." Now, if I go back over to what John the Baptist is saying, here's what John the Baptist says.
I know where you're going.
in Luke chapter 3. Mm-hmm. So this is obviously our introduction to him as his ministry. He's baptizing. And he said, "Therefore to the crowds that came out to be baptized him, you brood of vipers, who warn you to flee from the wrath to come? Bear fruits in keeping with repentance, and do not begin to say to yourselves, We have Abraham as our father. For I tell you, God is able from these stones to raise up children for Abraham. Even now the axe is laid to the root of the trees. Every tree, therefore, that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire." So obviously that language, the root in the branch, and he's saying, even now the axe is laid to the root of the trees, and every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So it's like John the Baptist is obviously, he knows why he's there. Like,
You know what's
Yeah, that like that's he knows. Like he does know.
it's strange though, because it's like he did, but it's like he didn't really know that he was Elijah, I guess, because in John chapter 1 verse 19 it says, and this was a record of John when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, who art thou? And he confessed and denied not, but confessed, I am not the Christ. And they asked him, what then? Art thou Elias? And he saith, I am not. Art thou that prophet? And he answered, no. Then said they unto him, who art thou, that we may give an answer to them that sent us? What sayest thou of thyself? And he just said, I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah. So it's like they're asking him, are you Elijah? He's like, no, I'm just the one that's preparing the way for the Lord. But that's basically what Elijah was supposed to do. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting in the way that kind of Jesus is asked at times, and he deflects a lot about that kind of stuff. So maybe that's a similar situation where the reason isn't it interesting how when Jesus heals people and he says don't tell anybody, he's constantly trying to tell people not to tell people. And it's like, I think that one of the reasons, obviously, Jesus pronounces that he's God, but obviously he tries to not emphasize that, because I think he's trying to emphasize the fact that his humanity for the most part, and to know the signs of what like who he is and why he's there, instead of like the authority that he is God, because obviously if he could manifest that he's God at any point, but he doesn't.
Yeah, he said he could call down how many legions to come.
Yeah, like seven legions of angels to do whatever he wanted. Right. Again, so I guess that's probably a lesson to people that it had to be this way. And again, like when he's talking about like that flesh is not going to inherit the kingdom of God. So like he had to die. He had to die. And I think that, gosh, I was listening to a teaching today, and I will get into this, but it's almost like that. It's like that. It's a point. It's an interesting thing. Like it's appointed for every man to die, and it's like that. We don't know what happened to Elijah, and then it's like if he really did become John the Baptist, well then Elijah did die.
Yeah,
he got beheaded. And I was thinking about that too, and of all the parables of like the servants that get sent to people and they get treated shamefully and then killed. I mean, it seems like he was talking about, he might have been talking specifically about John the Baptist, who they treated him shamefully. They said he had a demon, and then he gets beheaded in unceremoniously fashion. And then obviously then the son comes, and then he's treated the same way. And then, yeah. So, I mean, obviously to say all that, you can draw a very clear pattern at this point. It's like, it's so obvious, like when we start looking into scriptures like this, of like understanding the Old Testament prophecies that are being fulfilled at the same time that you don't know about. And like I said, some of the leaders don't know, and they're recognizing the wrong kind of signs. Now you go into like the modern creation of Israel, and you're like, like you really have to try really hard to fit some of this stuff in here, because it's like, it makes perfect sense to the people that understand this. And so at this point, like, I think there's a naive view in Christendom, churchianity, that they think that the Jews are okay, right? Because they're still God's chosen people, and they believe the whole Bible except for the New Testament. They believe all the Old Testament stuff, and they just don't accept Jesus. But one day they're going to, so it's going to be fine. But then you look at the people, if you go through like the demographics, I don't know if that's the right word, but like the beliefs in that land right now, they say that's one of the most atheistic countries in the whole world.
Yeah, and they're the capital for sodomy, the worldwide capital of, trying to dance around that word,
Right. But, no, that, I mean, yeah, the place is not, it's not religious people, right. Put it that way. So like that, it doesn't mean that they can't be saved like everyone else can. I believe they can. And I believe that's the kind of the point where there's not a separate covenant for them now. I believe that once Jesus died and he gave everyone the opportunity, like you think about like when I always in my profile is like, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, Romans 1:16, where it says, because it came, because it has the power of salvation to all who believe, first to the Jew, then to the Greek.
Right.
So like, again, so you think about like the Jesus ministry, he even tells a Gentile woman, I'm here for the lost children of Israel. So like, so that's why he's here. He knows judgment's coming and he's preaching to these specific people. And then I think it was in Romans 12, Paul's saying that basically has God abandoned his promises to Israel? He's like, by no means. Just like he said, actually, the specific example he used was Elijah was saying that I'm basically the only one, God. Like I'm being persecuted. I'm the only one, and God's saying, no, there's still 7,000. I still have 7,000 servants who have not bowed the knee to Baal.
Yeah, there's a remnant.
And
there's always a remnant.
In the same way that there was a remnant there.
Right.
And so, like, again, people think that all of Israel will be saved at some point. Like, it's almost a very bizarre mindset where, like, they're going to be unwillingly saved. It's like they don't really want him, but he's going to show up one day and they're all going to commit to him. But it makes more sense that obviously in the way that it was done, where the Holy Spirit was poured out on Pentecost, and then you have Peter and the apostles, literally tongues of fire are raining down on them. And then they are speaking in every different language. And guess what? They speak in every international language basically at that point. Is what they're telling us. And the people who are saved, they probably went where they were going, and then they told everybody the gospel in all their different languages.
Yeah, and
so that's how that's also how that all the nations could be preached to, because I think that even Paul himself says that was fulfilled.
Yeah,
all the nations heard.
What's crazy is at the Tower of Babel, he divided all their languages, but at that point it was like a reverse babbling of the languages to where they could all understand each other. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's a good call. Yeah, that's actually But obviously, that's what God's purpose was to save those. And again, like, so if you start to look at the book of Acts as like the last days of Israel, there's just masses of people getting saved.
Yeah.
Right then, I think like this, like the first day of Pentecost, I think there was like 3,000 people.
Yeah, there's
saved.
thousands and thousands.
So it'd be interesting to see how many were saved at the end. Again, was it 144,000?
I was going to ask you that.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, obviously, it really only makes sense in that way where I think we talked about on our last podcast. Well, let's just say somebody could prove in some kind of way that they're Jewish. Like, I mean, like not just religiously Jewish, like you're literally related to you're in the tribe of Judah some way, like you're related to David some way. All right, what about all the other tribes? I mean, it's like that seems like a pretty hard, to trace your lineage back. Just think about what happened to Israel in 70 AD. Regardless if you think that was the end, that place obviously got just torched, dispersed, desolated. And then what kind of records would be kept from people like that? I mean, I don't think that anybody's really got the receipts to go much past, 1 AD or 70 AD. Because maybe if you probably have some royal lineage, those people probably do have the receipts to go back way far. Yeah. As far as like almost back to Noah's day. But outside of that, normal people, how would they even know if they're related to Joseph or Benjamin or Naphtali?
Yeah.
Or Zebulun?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, no one's going to have those receipts, because back then in the first century, for example, Paul, he knew where he came from. He said that he was of the tribe of Benjamin, right? Paul was. And so he knew for a fact, these people knew for a fact where they came from. And like you said, today, how are they going to say that? Are they going to just say, oh, well, I took a 23andMe test, so I'm of the tribe of Benjamin? It's not going to happen that way. And so these people, in order for the futurist view to happen, these people need to be 12,000 from every single tribe. And I just don't see the likelihood of it being that way today. Whereas back then, you said all these people were getting saved, which they were. Maybe it was 144,000, but at that time, they knew exactly what tribe they were from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and again, they also lived in the land. And you think about so Jesus is telling in Matthew 10 about they're going to go over all the cities. Before they go over all the cities in Israel, the Son of Man is coming. So they're going over all the cities of Israel. So they're literally going to the ends of the land, which would have actually had like whether they could actually prove that they were of like related to Dan or Naphtali or all the other tribes, Levi, they would still be in that land that was designated. I think in the book of Ezekiel, it talks about like the land being divided up into certain areas. So if they were in that land, those would qualify. And again, so the people who are, Jesus stays on the earth for 40 years after he's resurrected. The apostles are obviously doing the most incredible miracles.
Yeah.
I mean, they're knowing this is happening. And again, they are preaching that Jesus' return is imminent.
Yeah.
He's coming back very soon. And so people are saying, and not only that, like the emphasis of what's going to happen. So like you think about it, like when Peter's saying to the scoffers that, they say like, this place is just like it always has been. It's like since creation. And he's like, oh no, you neglect to remember that this place was destroyed by a flood. And this time the flood's going to be by fire. So they're not only saying this in like the way that you need Jesus, it's like you need Jesus now. Like you need, because we don't even know when he's, again, like the idea of the thief in the night preached the way it is now of this rapture where he's going to take people to heaven. That's not what the thief in the night was about. The thief in the night was a threat of it.
Exactly.
It was like, if you're not ready, if you're not looking, again, so when he's describing all of the things in Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13, it's like if this catches you unaware, you are dead. Like you are like that's the kind of, I think that sometimes people think of Judgment Day, they think of the white throne judgment, but there's other types of judgment biblically.
Yeah.
The judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what was happening. So like if you were not ready, again, you think about it. So there was probably a time where if you saw the Roman armies coming, and I think it was in 66 AD or 67 AD, they're rolling up around the city. If you didn't leave before then, you probably never got a chance to leave.
No.
That was it. So he's telling you all the signs that this was going to happen. So in that way, that was judgment. Just in the very same way, again, when you read the Old Testament prophets like Jeremiah talking about what's going to happen when Nebuchadnezzar comes. Like if you guys don't repent, and even didn't even say like you can save your lives if you basically go give yourself up. Like, but if you try to hold yourself in and try to fight them off, again, I'm starting to think about this when Paul was talking about the strong delusion and the way we perceive the strong delusion, like, is it aliens?
Yeah, right.
Is it this woke nonsense? What is this? What's the strong delusion? When you actually hear like from like Josephus that you have the zealots that were defending the temple to the end because they thought that God was going to save them. You really think about it like that. That is the strong delusion, is because they thought there's no way that God is going to let this temple be destroyed.
Yeah.
Because they did not love the truth, and they should have known it was going to be destroyed based on what Jesus said. Mm-hmm. But they didn't know, or they didn't believe. And like that, talk about delusional. That I don't think the Romans, based on what I've read, they didn't want to do that to Jerusalem. But they left them, but obviously they were fighting so hard against the Romans that they almost kind of gave them no choice. And then later I was reading that Titus was actually trying to pull the troops back, and the troops were like possessed, and they were being so brutal. It's almost like that, you think about even like in the Old Testament prophecies or wars, when God threw these certain troops into confusion, is it possible that he put a spirit in them of, you guys are going to lay waste to this place until it's done, until it's all fulfilled. I mean, because that's what you're saying. Like Titus was like, they were saying like the Romans didn't want to destroy the temple, but the troops at that point, they said they were uncontrollable, which is kind of remarkable because you think of the Romans typically being very disciplined in that kind of way. Especially that's the way that I've always read about the history of it, but they weren't in that way because Jesus said all these things were going to happen, and they happened.
Well, what's interesting too is like if we were talking earlier how you said the disciples were looking at the temple and saying, look at how great it is, and if it was just magnificent, structure, if you go and you spoil a city, you just basically take their stuff. And like, why wouldn't they just take residence in that beautiful thing? But no, they destroyed it to the point that not one stone was left upon another that wasn't thrown down, just like Jesus said. So it's just like, it had to have been something in them, because just like with these old world buildings that we're talking about, the founders, they just kind of came in, and then they just went into them. They didn't, I mean, yeah, they destroyed a lot, but they resided in them as well.
Right. Well, the Romans seemed very practical the way that they're written about. I mean, that could be one reasons why they say the founders of this country, kind of modeled themselves after them. Because like the Romans, obviously they had to set up governors, and they were not trying to reign over ashes.
Yeah.
They were trying to reign over, and I think Jerusalem was obviously a historic city.
Yeah.
It had lots of history. I mean, I'm sure that, again, like you think about it, like the Freemasons worshiping Solomon, like the idea that they had where Solomon reigned, King David, again, they actually respected Solomon and David. Mm-hmm. Everybody in the ancient world would have. So having this city, this walled city that was thought to be a very impregnable place to get into, this temple that, again, is like megalithic temple.
Right.
The Romans, again, you like look at places like Baalbek, where they use some of the stones and they built their temple to Jupiter on top of stuff. So like there's no real practical reason they would want to do this the way that it was done, other than, again, you have two different spirits basically working against themselves, where you have the zealots who literally believe that God is going to save them, when God has prophesied the opposite since the times of John the Baptist. And then you have this happening where the Romans, they said there's a bloodlust of the Roman soldiers that literally will not stop, even when Titus, who was the emperor's son and eventually becomes the emperor, he's telling them to stop, and they won't stop. And that's when they said there's literally blood running down like rivers down the steps of the temple. They said the horses' bridles were getting all bloody. I mean, this is what Josephus is writing about, and that's like that's kind of described as like the wine press.
That's prophecy too, about the blood going up to the horse's bridle too. That's
what I'm saying. Like when you read some of that stuff, and it's like it's so much to ignore. And then again, like to hop back to modern times, it's like it. Okay, so the armies are going to circle Jerusalem now, and it's like there's still so many things that would have to take place in order to understand that kind of that happening. Again, so this is what, again, when you were saying that we know biblically 40 years. 40 years is a generation. So if the fig tree generation was 40 years, 1988, people would be like, well, that's 40 years, so it's got to happen. It's got to happen now. But now we say you can stretch that out further to 80 years.
Yeah.
And I guess where we at as far, if it was 80 years, we'd be talking about, but like in
2000, is it 2008 or something?
Oh, no, it'd be 2018, 2028. Okay. So we would still I think that's why probably a lot of people are still like chalking up 2030 as a significant date.
Yeah.
I mean, there's reason to believe there's something going to happen. Again, we're not the people who are saying nothing's going to happen. I mean, I guess the hearts of men doing whatever they want to do. Again, so that's what I'm saying. I encourage people to go look into the creation of Israel and the people who, like, what their goals are. Literally, I've heard that these people want to actually rule from Jerusalem, which again sounds very Antichrist-ish, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is anything that God has ordained, that God has put a mind in them to do. I mean, again, some of this could be repeating patterns of the fact that you have this rebellious kind of people, and it's going to lead to a culmination at the very end, Gog, Magog type situation. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, like, I just don't. Again, the red heifers, is that okay? So that's maybe something. But again, like, you have to like think in your mind, like, okay, so what prophecy is there about the red heifers are going to come back? Well, there isn't one, because you have to first get red heifers, then you have to get stones, and then you have to start building a temple, and then you need to actually, I don't know, you need to get the Levites back. I mean, do they have to be Levites to do this? We're
Yeah.
like what all needs to take place in order to have this? And I said, I don't want to clown on this too much because it wasn't that long ago that I believed
Right.
all the same things that people are saying
Right.
this. But when I really started to think about it, I can see very clearly there's signs of like things like the mark of the beast, the one world currency, and that actually seems very like I could see that happening now. I don't know if that would be the mark of the beast, but I could see some kind of form of identification that you could not buy or sell with. Would that be a mark of the beast? I mean, again, that's based on what I'm saying now. No, I don't think it would be the mark of the beast. I'm not saying take it.
Yeah.
And I think this is where people get a little resistant to the things we're saying because I'm not saying go take a mark on your hand. I'm definitely not saying that. I'm saying view everything through the prism of what God would want. And if there's any doubt in my mind that any of this stuff has not happened, I would never get marked in a certain kind of way and be beholden to some government when Jesus said specifically, don't worry about what you eat, don't worry about what you wear. You know, like how much more precious are you to me than birds and flowers and everything. So like, don't do that stuff. But point being, like people trying to think about a one world religion and then a man controlling everybody and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that couldn't happen. It seems like that's a ways off.
Yeah.
Before any of that could really be, I mean, yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, just the whole, this person is the Antichrist and these people are so convinced 100% that, you know, this politician is the Antichrist, this person is the Antichrist, this king or whatever. And then after that, it's like, oh, we're convinced this is the mark of the beast. And, you know, it's just like this endless cycle where it's just so much speculation and it just kind of gets jumbled so much. And I think, and I kind of wonder, like how you were saying that there's going to be this man and he's ruling over everyone. And, you know, I'm sure it was somewhat like that, but I wonder how much we get that narrative from, you know, like Lost or the Left Behind series, you know, the movies and all that. So it's just like this movie that's kind of playing out in people's heads, how they think it's supposed to happen. But I honestly, there's a lot of stuff that people believe today that's not actually in the Bible. And I think it's just over time, it's just been misinterpreted or misconstrued because, you know, just like the second coming, you know, that's never mentioned in the Bible. It's just like a lot of these terms that people make up in order to support their beliefs, their doctrine, instead of just taking a step back and saying, well, what does the scripture actually say about this particular event, rather than me just believing what I've been told my whole life, you know?
Oh yeah, well, yeah, 100%. I think it's difficult again, like I said, without knowing what you're kind of looking for. And I said it wasn't until recently that I was willing to accept some of these things. And it's like even as we're just looking at it now, like realizing what Malachi said versus what John the Baptist is saying. Like he's quoting from it basically.
Yeah.
Like this is what he's talking about when he's like, so this is our first introduction to them. So like, what would those people have thought about what he said? You know, I imagine the Pharisees are there, knows what he was saying.
Yeah.
Like they know. And I think that's why like sometimes you see like the tension between Jesus and the Pharisees, because he's quoting stuff or he's making references to things and you don't really know what he's talking about, because I think we as who have been taught a certain way, we know that Jesus came to die for us. So that's what we're focused on. Of course, and that should be our focus, is like what he did for us and the promises he's given to us. But his mission that was just about as important was what was going to happen right after that. And so he's telling these other people and why there is an incentive, why there is a real emphasis on now, like the time is now, that these things are at hand.
Yeah.
The kingdom is here. Yeah. And he continues to press on people about that. So like if you had a a 2,000-year delay and all this stuff, it doesn't really. Again, so why are they going out to the cities in Asia to tell everybody like you have to do this now?
Yeah. And I
mean, I understand that we're not promised any more time, but I mean, like, I think that there's a reason why it's spread so much, and it is, like I said, the Great Tribulation is not capitalized in the Bible. That's how we figure it. But it's like Jesus says, "In this world, you'll have tribulation." Everyone's like, "Oh, he wasn't talking about that, though." But as like, then you have to tell people, you know what happened to the early church. You know what Nero did to people. He literally lit his streets with Christians and called them Roman candles. Right. Like, so when we celebrate the 4th of July with Roman candles, understand that the first Roman candles were literally Christians tied to stakes who got set on fire. Yeah. And you're telling me that wasn't a great tribulation? I mean, like, that seemed pretty intense to, so those people are believing. And again, you think about even the book of Revelation was talking about the saints crying out under the altar. How long, Lord? How much longer until you come back and judge this place? And so with the second coming, it never mentions second coming. Again, it talks about my coming, and it talks about my coming on the clouds. And so that's why maybe it wasn't perceived like that. Maybe people had always been told it was going to be, versus what he just, like, literally what he said. I guess there's scriptures about the Mount of Olives being split in two, and those things could have been those things. I mean, I hate to say this, those things could have been spiritual messages there, because Jesus doesn't say that in Matthew 24. He doesn't say that in Luke 21. Yeah. He says he's coming back on the clouds with great power. And then you think about like the signs that were in the heavens when there was a destruction of Jerusalem. There was, like, in 65 AD, there's armies fighting in the sky. Was that the war in heaven that was spoke about in Revelation 12? Maybe this was what happened. Like, so if you think about it, like, there's a fight in the heavens, literally, like, what's actually going to be visibly seen. Was that when the ruler of this world was cast down and his time was short? And then what happens is you have this mind of the Roman soldiers to decimate Jerusalem.
Yeah,
maybe. I mean, that fits more into like this than to go into this futurist view where you're like, you have to try so hard to fit parts of Revelation into the modern days where you're like, even I said, and again, we're guilty of it, because I was saying, is the image of the beast like AI or something like that? I've just said that probably last summer.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not going to say that I didn't say that, because that's how you have to think in order to rationalize this. When you think about it, like a mark of the beast could be the fact that, for the one, the beast is in the book of Daniel are empires, right?
Kingdoms.
Like they're represented. They're kingdoms. So so people's like, well, how are they going to have a one world kingdom? It's like they had one then.
Yeah.
It was called Rome. Yeah. So the Romans ruled everything. The emperor thought of himself as a god. I mean, literally, you can look it up. I said, Domitian, Caligula, and Nero all claimed to be gods. They literally claimed to be incarnations of Apollo.
Yeah.
Who, again, Apollyon, Apollo, he's mentioned in the book of Revelation. All that happened then. And if you didn't operate based on how the Romans wanted to, I imagine you couldn't buy or sell.
Yeah.
Now, do I know exactly what the mark was? But I mean, I don't know. But I do know that if the Romans didn't let you engage in commerce, they could control that pretty well. It would be pretty hard to do that now.
Yeah. And another thing, what's interesting too, is Nero, apparently, just from all the atrocious things that he was doing to Christians and stuff like that, that he actually got a nickname, the Beast, as well, just because he just had no heart. You know what I mean? He just was so brutal. So I think that's a very interesting nickname for him to have as well. You know what I'm saying? Just going along with what you're saying.
Oh, definitely.
So,
well, isn't like, so a famous thing that people know about Nero as well is that he was fiddling when Rome burned. So what's kind of interesting, if you think about it through this mindset of like all these signs were happening at this time, we're just told that he was just crazy and he blamed the Christians. Maybe he blamed the Christian God for setting fire to Rome. Remember, because that's why he was coming after the Christians, because he blamed them for it. So maybe he had a better reason to blame him than other than him just being crazy.
Yeah.
You know, is it perhaps that God was casting judgment on Rome? Because again, even if it's crazy when you think about that Pompeii, the city of Pompeii, we're told about that all the time, that place was literally a corrupt Roman city, a very like Sodom and Gomorrah-ish city. And that place was, burned up by a volcano. Like the people were like petrified from like the ashes and like the lava and everything. Insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you had mentioned just a little bit ago about when it's written that the Mount of Olives will be split in two, and people look at that place in the Middle East today too, and they're saying, well, the Mount of Olives isn't split in two, so surely he hasn't come back yet. But to my point earlier, like, what if that's not even? And I don't really, we haven't really discussed this too much about your stance on that, but I'm kind of more believing that that place over there is not even the real place. Like, what if that place is somewhere else? Because I know a lot of people believe that, even America, we might be actually Egypt. Like, this isn't America, this is actually Egypt. And between California and all that, there, it used to be called the Red Sea around that area too.
It's very bizarre.
So that stuff's interesting too. And they just kind of changed all the names to certain things. And so, like I had said earlier, what if after the abomination of desolation, the destruction of the second temple, all that basically people were evacuated out of that place to where no one can dwell in that land anymore. But what if towards the end, that's when they're going to surround that place for the Gog and the Magog war, for the camp of the saints are, maybe they're over there. But
well, there's really no tell. I mean, there's really no telling. I think that's the one thing that it's funny. On the last podcast I did, I played that clip from Tucker Carlson saying that the history we've been taught is wrong, and he starts talking about civilizations in Illinois that are 10,000 years old, and crazy. I mean, obviously insane sounding stuff, but I mean, like Tucker Carlson, I know he wore the Kabbalah bracelet, and I'm not saying believe everything he said, but whether he's controlled opposition, he's saying this thing. It's still a wild thing to say.
Yeah.
As a guy who does have a pretty decent reputation as far as like media people go, he says this thing. So you have to understand like that we go on faith a lot about what we're told about these things. Like, how would I know? First of all, I've never been to that land. I've heard people say the same things that you're saying, that like that a lot of the mountains or the seas are not really, the rivers are really not all that impressive.
Yeah.
And it's a place that God promised them. And obviously it sounded like a great place because it was the land of milk and honey. It was the land that the giants set up shop in. It was obviously must have been something great about it. Now, like, how would we know if we were lied to about that? And the truth is we wouldn't. I mean, we have the concept of time we have is very limited.
Yeah.
Based on our own life experience, to think that we could know something that 2,000 years ago. Even I said, it's funny. So the last talk I did, now we're talking about the lost history of flat Earth. And it really blows me away, the whole thing about the maps.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how much anybody else thinks about that. But again, think about this. So now I'm going to speculate wildly. So this is like, so it was the age of Aries. Interestingly enough, like Aries is the war god, the god of war. He was Mars to the Romans, and that was the age that Jesus was right before Jesus. So Jesus shows up, and it's the age of Pisces. And I said, I don't think it's a coincidence that the fish is the symbol of like the Jesus fish. Pisces is the fish, and so all our maps have the tropics based on the age of Aries. So you have the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, and this is all like, again, the ages are not necessarily hippy dippy new age things. It's not just satanic. The Mazzaroth is a biblical thing. The people even know about the age, and I think that's what even the Bible, it starts talking about the age, the end of the age. I think that could be what they're talking about. But so all that being said, the history books say that they made those designations of Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn before Christ came. And then Christ come, and based on what we're told history-wise, nobody was going across the oceans back then, right?
Yeah.
So First of all, how did they even know about the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn before Jesus came? Because we're told they didn't go across the ocean until 1492,
Yeah.
right? So what this leads you to believe is that those maps are not reliable, because if guys like Columbus and Magellan and the great explorers that we know about, if they needed to navigate with the stars sometimes, they would have updated the maps to the age of Pisces, which would have been, I think that the tropics would have been Gemini and Sagittarius. So what that leads me to believe is the maps are either fake or they're really old. And so think about this. So this is wild time. Now, if Jesus came back and then he established some kind of kingdom, again, like a heavenly kingdom, I don't believe it was whether it was California or the Jerusalem we know of. I don't believe it was on the earth as we know it. I believe it was, it was in the clouds.
Yeah.
But is it possible that maps from the age of Pisces would have shown some geographic locations with extra land masses, perhaps like a place that says, hey, this is where the camp of the saints is. Maybe it showed a lands like past the ice wall that we don't know about. Maybe it showed a lot of stuff. It's like, because why don't they have maps from the age of Pisces?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, because this is when people would have needed to navigate based on the stars. Because again, if they were just around the Mediterranean, well, they'd have got to land eventually. But I mean, when you're trying to navigate across the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, yeah, you definitely need to know where the tropics are to base your calculations on. I mean, that's celestial navigation. Like, they need to know that. So the fact that it's not on there, yeah, what are they hiding? Do you think that they could possibly be hiding? Maybe those maps actually had the correct locations of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so hard to even know, and I think, even us talking about this, it sounds so crazy to people. Like, why would they lie about maps? Why would they lie about this or that? Well, if we're living in Satan's short season, he's got a short time, and he's got to deceive the nations, even to the point where, Jesus hasn't even returned yet, according to a lot of these teachers, Bible colleges, all that. And I just think it's interesting that, no one, like, even in the Bible colleges, no one's ever told about, like, this history that in 70 AD, what happened at the destruction of the temple, because that was a huge, huge event, huge fulfillment of prophecy. But going back to the short season, like, if you were reading the Bible and you said, okay, there's going to be a short season where Satan deceives the nations, well, what would that look like to you? You know what I'm saying? Like, how would you know what it was or wasn't? Like, how would you know if you're not living in that time? What would it be like in that time? You know what I'm saying? So it's just, I think it's pretty prideful and arrogant to think like, oh, that's impossible, and you guys are off the rocker on this. But, just think about that question. Well, how would it be in Satan's short season then if it wouldn't be like this?
Yeah, I've challenged anybody to give us an alternative explanation. Would you know you were living in the short season?
Yeah, exactly.
So if you say no, then obviously that leaves room to believe, could it be now? And I think that's funny, because that is the answer of why they would lie. Almost every question we always ask, why would they lie about that? Well, what if they were trying to, like, completely have you twisted around dates, locations, everything in order to confuse you, in order to just say, it's just too much. I think that's what probably a lot of people are. They're like, why are you even trying to get into this? It's like, it's too complicated. I guess because it's like, it's got my mind kind of all like, going like 100 miles an hour about like, what could, like, this explains a lot of stuff, and it obviously leads to a lot more questions. But yeah, that this answers all the why would they lie.
It does.
every one of the why would they lie, it answers that question.
It really does. I mean, you think about it, the medical institution lies, the schooling, all lies, cosmology lies, the the lot of what the churches are teaching lies, you know. And another thing, people think that like Satan is somewhat scared of going into a church or something and like say infiltrating it. It's like, oh no, it's like you know, when the vampire sees the cross, he like starts hissing. You know what I mean? Like Satan's not like that. He comes as an angel of light, and he's infiltrated all the churches. And what's crazy is like this whole, you know, we're waiting for the second coming of Christ. It seems as if like he's okay with that message, because we know the censorship nowadays, and if any information that they don't want you to know about, it gets scrubbed. It's hard to find that info. But he doesn't even have to destroy the message of Jesus is coming back, and it seems like he might be okay with that message. He just has to mess you up on the timing of it, so you're just confused about where you are in the timeline. So you could believe that Jesus is coming back all you want, and that there's going to be a third temple, but what's most important is he's confusing us about where we are on the timeline. And I think that's so snaky, you know what I mean? It's so sneaky.
Yeah. Well, that, isn't it? I don't know how much you looked into this, but you know, a lot of people like, where do we get this like the pre-trib rapture from? Like a lot of this, like the eschatology we have is from like the Schofield Bible, and that wasn't that like sometime in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And do you know who funded that? Like basically the creation of that Bible was the same people who funded the creation of the nation of Israel in 1948.
Oh wow.
Obviously, like to a later extent, but it's like, yeah, those same groups are the ones who put that together. So isn't that convenient?
Yeah.
That all this eschatology fits into this prophecy about this place, and it allows the modern church to say, let's support them regardless, when literally it's like it's anything. Like, how much does it have to do with your belief in God? It doesn't really.
Yeah.
It's like it's so confused that it's like, but telling somebody that who doesn't know the things we're talking about, it's like, yeah, the devil is not stupid. The devil's very evil, but he is certainly not stupid, because that's what we're saying. Even the subject, even like we can't even say all the things we really want to say, because like we have to dance around these issues, when the last thing we are racist, when we're not even talking about a specific race or anything. Like, we're talking about political movements. We're talking about people who are got great power. We're not talking about people who are the lowly people that we're picking up, we're punching down on anybody. We're talking about like literally the people who run this place that have that kind of power to establish a nation when they want to.
Yeah.
You know, create Bibles when they want to. And then so all this stuff is filtered through this. And then we get even maligned by people who are like our friends. Actually, that's one thing I wanted to go with you. I wanted to ask you, I said, because I made a video about that, you know, like one of the last little clips, and I was talking about the soldiers in the sky. And I was saying that, you know, like, we're going to be left with this day when what Jesus said about that this generation won't pass away till all these things are filled. Heaven away is going to pass away, but my words will not. And as I said, maybe one day, maybe the reason he said that was because one day we're going to be left with, that's all we're going to be left with. And I asked him, that's like, so do you believe it? And of course, that challenged people in that kind of way, where I listened to a sermon by R.C. Sproul, and he was saying that how amazing a prophecy it was for Jesus to predict the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. Again, like a completely fortified city, a megalithic temple. The jaws must have been dropping when he said that. And like, no way. And in 40 years, that was accomplished. In a generation, like, as we were saying, they got to move the goalposts. In 40 years, that happened. And so he says this, and it's not even written about in our Bibles. It's not even talked about in our churches. And when you mention it, people kind of recoil, because they say, well, Jesus didn't mean that. And so like what R.C. Sproul was saying is that what you're really doing is you're actually giving credibility to Jesus's biggest critics, the critics of the Bible, to say Jesus is a false prophet because what he said didn't actually happen.
Exactly.
So they read it that way. And actually, we're at the point now where we're saying, yeah, I believe it did happen, just like he said it was going to happen. Maybe some of the things you were a little confused about how it was going to happen, but I believe him. And then I have literal people in my comment section who've been following me on TikTok since the beginning saying, I don't think you're a Christian anymore.
Yeah.
Because you believe what Jesus said. I mean, so I think that, again, the devil is not stupid. I mean, like, think about that. So, like, that's how he can turn us. Talk about being a divided church when people are saying that now they're questioning the salvation of somebody because we take Jesus's words as literal now. I mean, how much are you experiencing that, Ricardo?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of pushback on this particular subject, but to my surprise, a lot of my feedback as well has been people just saying, "Wow, that's a pretty good point." So, I'll have to think about that. You know what I mean? So at least presenting it.
That's
so good. You got kind of both sides to where people are like, "Nah, that's way off. It's impossible. Jesus, there's no way he could have come back because surely I would have known it if he did," kind of thing. You know what I mean? So, right. I mean, it's just crazy. But you get both sides of the argument on that. But hopefully, we're presenting this information in a way that's kind of at least making people think. So don't trust what we're saying. Don't trust what your pastor's saying. But like you just said earlier, like it might be in that time where it's the only thing that we have to go by is God's word. Don't trust your history. Don't trust men. That if you trust in men, it's a snare, the Bible says. So let God be true and every man a liar. And, like you were talking about these people who don't think you're Christian anymore because you're actually just believing what the word says. Well, I had listened to that Dean Odell thing that you had sent me today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And, and you got people like that. And he's just, he likes to appeal to authority. He's like basically saying, well, I wrote like 10 books, so obviously like I have this authority, and like, have you written 10 books? No. So I have, so you need to listen to me, kind of thing. And I think that's a problem that people get into, is they appeal to that authority and they're like, oh, he's right. He must know what he's talking about because he's speaking,
Yeah.
So, and
well, yeah, it's like I heard that too, and I was just like, well, I haven't read any of your books. So I don't even know if they're any good. Like, so I mean, it's kind of like I've got friends who've written books. I mean, of course, I like my friends' books, but I mean, my point is, like, now that we're like, I think this is probably challenging to a lot of the gatekeepers, is the fact that it's got to really ruffle some feathers of people like in their big churches. And you can think about even the people at the mega churches. Now you have, Christian YouTubers that obviously have millions of views on video. I mean, like that is probably really challenging for them, saying, oh, wow, like this guy didn't go through all the proper channels to get to here. He didn't go to seminary. He didn't go to this. And then so people like us pop up and we have an audience. And so that's what he's saying, is like Christian YouTubers, like, or YouTube Christians, like almost like that's a lesser version of Christian. When we've never claimed to be anything other than people asking the same question, like the questions that, like, that's what I said. I don't want to ever really lose that I have like the kind of the bro vibe of like, I'm just a guy like you guys, you guys and gals, and I'm trying to ask the questions. And people are asking like, well, why are you changing your channel? Your channel didn't used to be like, I'm like, well, I'm just a guy, and I'm growing and I'm learning things, and I'm asking questions like I always have. But then you have like a Dean Odell saying that these guys don't have a shepherd under them to tell them what to be able to talk about. Yeah. And you're like, well, I do. I have the good shepherd.
Yeah.
Where did he tell me that I needed you?
Yeah.
Because you can point to that chapter and verse. I'd like to read that. But we didn't. And so, yeah, like, I'm sure Dean Odell is probably he's probably, you could think about, I'm not going to say he's a Pharisee, but I mean, you could imagine like the Pharisees knew the Bible really well. They knew the scriptures really well, probably better than the apostles did, because they had it like memorized. Yeah. But that's not why God chose them. He chose them because their hearts, and he chose them because they were not like that. So that, hey, you could be a YouTuber and you could still be doing what God wants you to do.
That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah. So like obviously Dean Odell gained some kind of a rock star status with the flat earthers because he took on Greg Locke, and it's like, who couldn't have beat Greg Locke in that debate?
Yeah.
It's like Greg Locke was just clown, he was just making a mockery of the whole
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, like the Dean Odell thing that really tripped me out was when he was saying, when he went, if you go into the Greek, this generation could actually mean that generation. And I thought, like, I've tried to say this more than a couple of times recently, that when you see somebody who goes into the word games of the Greek versus the Hebrew versus the English, and they change one word and it changed the complete context of what's said in that verse or that passage, be wary.
Yeah.
Because again, this is not like Jesus is not confusing when he's talking to the people he's talking to. So then again, the thing about, I always go back to this. He says the big sign in the whole thing, the reason he's even saying this is because the temple gets destroyed.
Yeah.
Well, that happened in that generation. So it's very difficult to now say that all the other things didn't happen as well, unless he's not telling the truth.
Yeah.
And we're the ones who are saying that he is. And yeah, and then you can go ahead. Like, what do you think about some of the other stuff? The points.
Yeah. So like when you were talking about I call it the Greek game, because it's just like they can perform these mental gymnastics on people, and I think that's basically the whole reason why God gave us, his word in English, so that we don't need to go to these Pharisees and these priests to tell us what the Bible says, because you and I could just read it, right? We know, right? We know what it says.
Isn't that very similar to when like the Bible got translated out of Latin, and people are like, they were mad that it did, like they were literally killing people because they didn't want guys like you and I.
Yeah, that's exactly what was happening. But he had brought up another point about like we're 20-year-old novices or something like that. And, he may not even know about us, but he's obviously referring to people like us, maybe indirectly. Mm-hmm. And you and I are both a lot older than 20. And, I've been like, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a novice, and that's not like out of pride or anything, but, I've been reading the Bible for like past 15 years of my life. So I've read it and I know what's in it. So it's not like I just started up this thing like 6 months ago and I need to submit to this man in a white robe or something like that and tell me what the Bible says,
It sounds like he's like Ron Burgundy, when he's saying, I've got all these leather-bound books in mahogany.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I'm kind of a big deal. I've written books. And it's like, well, I can go write a book. I mean, I don't know how good it'll be, it might have a lot of spelling errors. But no, so us talking about this now, I guess this is the thing that really just, I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously we're just going to have to get used to it. It's kind of like that I have tried to, when I first started making videos, I railed against the pre-trib rapture because I said this is not biblical at all. And so I had people that would challenge me, and I've never been afraid to say that, but I never tried to doubt somebody's salvation because they believe that, so we've, like you and I know specifically, there was a guy on TikTok who was preaching, making rapture predictions. Again, he's been wrong, every one of them, by the way. And he was trying to say that us post-tribbers were like basically saying God was mean and we didn't believe in the blessed hope because we believed that he was going to allow us to go through tribulation. So we weren't Christians for believing that. And so you have these two camps. And then so that now you come into the place where I believe what Jesus said happened back then. Well, now we're not Christians because we believe that. And I think it's very hard to have a productive conversation with somebody when they immediately question if you're saved or not.
Right.
And I think that's what, like we were saying, like we had a problem with a guy on TikTok who had a very big account. And that's what he immediately says. We don't know the gospel of Christ. This is a heresy in the Bible, blah, blah, blah. And this is a guy we kind of knew. And I've tried to ask him questions and he never answered them. And then, so like you immediately go to like, the more we started to like bounce things off each other, and then you read the Bible, like as we just did, reading about John the Baptist, and you're like, wow, it's like it's not even unclear. It's very clear what's in the text. The things Jesus are saying are very clear. Then you read about 70 AD, which again, they don't talk about that.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's like I feel like that if he wanted to say we're wrong, which again, we're not saying we're fully right about like all the things, especially the little season things. I feel like I'm very confident now about the things that Jesus said would happen in that generation happened. Now, do I know that we're in the little season? No, I don't know that.
Yeah.
You know, that I could be wrong about that. But I wish you'd have somebody who would actually be willing to go at the teeth of our argument and actually say, hey, let's talk about 70 AD. There's a reason you believe that. It's not because all of a sudden you worship the devil, or like you immediately just you don't believe in, you know, the faith in Jesus and the grace of God anymore.
Yeah.
You've rejected that. I mean, like, again, what does that have to do with, like, what does believing this like, I still believe that God has got a plan for us. I don't think he's abandoned us. I believe he's good. So I trust no matter what, when these things are fulfilled, God is looking out for his sheep, right? That's what he said. He said he would go back for the one if he would. So I believe that. So if you're not willing to address us like that, we're not, first of all, we're not 20s. We're not 20 years old. We're not kids. We're not just YouTubers. You know, we're your brothers and your sisters in Christ who have legitimate questions, and we're legitimately reading the Bible as adults, and we don't need our hand held through it. We need like, you know, we need to be able to talk about these things as a church without being
shut out.
You have to break fellowship with him. Like, I think even like Dean Odo, like one of the Bible scribe, he did a video on this, and he was responded to him on Facebook, and he blocks him.
Yeah, that's all they do.
That doesn't seem like a confident person in your position to do that.
Right.
And it's funny because it's like a lot of people were on Dean Odo's side, the way Greg Locke acted in that debate, and then he acts like this. It's almost like, did you learn these things from Greg?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting is, you know, I was just thinking about what, like, even some of the prophecies that are written in Daniel, and it specifically says, like, these are for the latter days, these are for the latter times. So he's telling them this is when this is going to happen in the latter days. But you go and read Book of Revelation, the New Testament, they tell you that they're living in the last days. So, like, if they were living in the last days then we must be in the last of the last days. Because, like, even John, he said, these things which must shortly come to pass. So he's telling him these things are going to happen very quickly. But, like, in Daniel, he plainly tells them, yeah, it's gonna be later on when this is going to happen. Like, he didn't say, like, it's going to happen immediately, like it seems like it does in Revelation as well. So when God is telling the prophecies, he just plainly tells you when it's going to be, pretty much. Like, no, it's going to be the latter days. Or he'll just say, this is going to happen very quickly. It's going to shortly come to pass. So he's not confusing with it, with his word.
Right. And I think that's the thing where you it's kind of funny. I was just thinking about, like, the way that there's all these promises to God's people, you know, like the original promises goes to Abraham, and then it's all the people that lead to Jesus. And then Jesus is there and he says, I'm here to fulfill all the things that have been written about me. And it's like, so he's keeping his promise to Abraham. And of course, through that promise, that all nations were going to be blessed. And it's like, he came and he did all the things he was going to do for those people. And then all nations were blessed after that. And so everybody's got the opportunity now. So this multi-tiered confusion of, like, well, now they gotta become a nation again. Now they've got to start sacrificing again. Now it's like, do you know how convoluted that sounds now? Like, again, this gap theory of, again, they have to put the gap in there because they know, and I've said this many times, because they know these things have not happened yet. They know it, like up here. They've been told that. This has been drilled in their heads that this has not happened yet. So therefore, the only thing they can do is insert all this extra space and time in here that's not written about. And then then it's confusing, and then they literally have to go to the place where they have to deny what Jesus actually said, or they have to say, well, in the Greek or this thing or this thing. Okay, so do I need to go read into every time Jesus said this and put a that in there? Go do that as a thought experiment. When he says that wicked generation, he's talking to specific people, and he's talking about a wicked generation. This generation, every time it was that, it makes no sense. Obviously, if something doesn't sound like it makes sense, it doesn't, because it's I don't know. I guess that's kind of pretty much all I have to say about that. It's just that I mean we are grown men. Like I said, we didn't just get saved yesterday, and we're looking into things. And I think it is uncomfortable. Some of these are uncomfortable truths. When, like I said, I think the reason you and I have come to this place at the same time is that we got on here on TikTok and social media exposing lies of things, and the lies went really deep. And then you realize they went really deep when you start to think about the things we've been told about from the pulpit, and from very powerful Christian leaders. And it's uncomfortable. And I think that people need to wrestle with that. And I think that's the place we come to, but it comes from a place of like, we want the truth. We love the truth. We're not going to accept illusions. We're not going to ignore what happened in 70 AD in order to say, well, if we admit what happened then that people will automatically recoil and think that we don't believe in the same things they do. I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy, but I mean, what everyone just really needs to consider, go back, read Daniel, the 70-week prophecy, because Israel was in Babylonian captivity at that time. Then they were going to build the temple in troublous times, like we said earlier. So at that time, the third temple, or the second temple, wasn't even built yet. So you just got to think, well, how can he be prophesying? Because they'll use those verses. They'll use those verses to say this is the third temple. But in good conscience, you can't do that, because the second temple hadn't even been built yet at that time, and they weren't even in their land either at that time. So it's like all this culminating events happening where Israel's getting restored back to their land. They're going to rebuild the temple, and then God is going to dwell in that temple, because like you said earlier, it doesn't matter if you build a third temple. God's not going to bless that. God's not going to dwell in that temple, because God doesn't dwell in temples made with hands today. Right now, we're not in that time anymore. So you just really have to consider those verses, because the whole 1948 thing, it doesn't fit, because Israel was already brought back to their land.
Right. Those promises were already fulfilled.
Exactly. So
yeah, and again, so that makes, that if you say they weren't, then that doesn't make Jesus sound like he's telling the truth. Because if this is what he was there for, so again, if this is what he was there for to do, he was supposed to be there for the lost sheep of Israel. Remember, that's what he says. That's what he told the Gentile woman. He did, and he, like I said, he became a lamb for them, died for them, and that's why he was so upset when they weren't repenting, because he knows that's the interesting thing. People always say that, like, Jesus talked about hell more than anybody did, because he knows how real it is, and he knew how real the thing that was going to happen in that generation, and that's why he kept on telling them. That's why Jesus is. It's funny, like, people have a perception of him, but he was really irritated a lot in the New Testament, wasn't it?
It's like this whole, like, Jesus is just this lovey-dovey guy, and he's just begging everyone to believe in him, and he didn't beg anyone. He just said, this is the way it is, and come follow me if you want. If not, go your way, brush the dirt off your feet.
Yeah, and so he knew, and again, that's like the woe to the unrepentant cities. And so, I mean, I think that that's what you really need to understand of like why he was the way he was, and like when you read it with that sense of the urgency and like all the things that were going to happen. 1948 does not fit into it. It does not fit into it one little bit, and it doesn't make sense that like the Rothschilds are going to bring the Israelites back to the land in order to do what? To go get to be even more rebellious before he comes back to restore them. I mean, like, I know. I mean, I know. I was there with you
Yeah.
guys too, but I would just encourage you guys again. Let the word of God be true, as if every man was a liar. Can like read the Bible again yourselves. If anything, I said one of the greatest things about like going in on this topic is that I've read my Bible a lot more lately than I have in researching any other topic.
Yeah.
You know, any other topic, I'm like, because I'm in the Old Testament, because I'm doing my straight through Bible, Bible reading. But I can't help it. I'm like, I just got to Second Kings, but I was like, I can't just stay in Kings. I have to go read Luke. I have to read
That's right.
John. I got to read. I got to read them again.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, anyways, Ricardo, do you have anything you want to tell everybody before you head out? Where to find you at?
Yeah. So you could go follow our podcast, Question the Narrative. Also, I'm on YouTube and TikTok, and that's Contend for the Faith. Both of them are the same. And if you guys go and follow me there, help out with the content, because I'm living in the land of shadows, it seems like, especially on TikTok right now. So
means you're doing something right.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, we appreciate you guys listening, and hopefully you guys can keep following along with our journey with this topic, very controversial topic, because it's. I mean, we don't claim to have all the answers, and we're just asking questions and trying to figure stuff out, and hopefully you guys can do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, hit us up in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, all the things we got to say all the time. But yeah, Ricardo's links will be in the description. David, his co-pilot over here, he was playing hurt. He could not make it in there. Yeah, so David Shane's as well. Check out his links. My links are in there as well. But yeah, if you guys, again, iron sharpens iron. So I know that the greatest thing about you guys is the comments. We always get like the comments every time I've done a video recently. It sent me on new places to look because everybody's doing this at the same time, and I think that's awesome.
That's right. That's right.
Well, anyways, God bless you all.
God bless.
We'll see you guys. See you guys on the next one.
Later.